Now, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, my client here, this movie, is innocent. He's done nothing wrong. Name one thing this movie did. What? There's no Waxwolf. Guilty.
Welcome to the horror show. You realize there is nowhere to run. There's no game to fight. Paranoia is getting your life.
Waxwork 2, Lost in Time. The 1992 sequel to the 1988 cult classic that were both directed by Anthony Hickox, who also finished and had released Hellraiser 3 Hell on Earth that same year. The plot. It is a time-hopping good time. What the hell is that? In these alternate dimensions that Mark and Sarah are traveling to for a good cause. Sarah's stepfather, who I believe was played by Buck Flower, was murdered by the severed hands from the end of the first Waxwork film, and now she needs solid evidence that isn't in the sink disposal. Can Mark and Sarah find valid evidence to support her case, or will they spend an eternity lost in time? So it is basically an easy way to get Mark and Sarah back into these alternate dimensions of time, but I still enjoyed the hell out of this movie. I do wish it had more of an impact whether Sarah won or not, and that the case was more intricate to the plot. This movie is goofy with a capital G. It is so self-aware that it actually breaks the fourth wall at points. It is really fun to watch, and it's also kind of ballsy, especially for a film from 1992, which is 4 years before the infamous Scream movie, mind you. We get a lot of the cast from the first movie returning. However, Deborah Foreman, who had a messy breakup with Hickox, did not reprise her role, and was replaced by Monica or whatever, who does a decent job. She seems a bit lost at times. Get it? Lost in time? And even though she isn't always the damsel in distress, she is sometimes more useless than helpful. For instance, every time Mark goes into another time dimension, he instantly knows who he is, and that what he is seeing is not real. As for Sarah, she falls into the trap every time. It is explained that Mark is a time warrior of sorts, which is really cool and would have made for another cool installment or two. But the reason I don't like Sarah as much in this installment is because she's shown a few too many times that she is oblivious that this is all just an illusion. Like she wasn't in the first movie or something. They also explain that she is not strong enough to be a time warrior, which is interesting and all, but it does do damage to the actress's ability to perform because she basically has to look dazed and confused for most of her role. Mark, played by Zach Galligan from Gremlins 1 and 2, and the first Waxwork, is great in this movie. He spends a majority of it in a bad wig. That just adds to the over-the-top nature of his character. Bruce Campbell, from the Evil Dead franchise and Maniac Cop 1 and 2, has a prolonged cameo as Professor of the Paranormal. He is an absolute riot. I loved his humor and the slapstick actions that occur around him and on him. Patrick McKee from The Howling and the first Waxwork also has a cameo as the returning grandfather to Mark. The projector scene is funny and clever. David Carradine from Kill Bill Volume 1 and 2, Cue the Winged Serpent and Death Race 2000, has a wicked small but important role as the one who tells Mark of some information of relevance to his mission. Scarabus, played by Alexander Godunov from Die Hard, plays the part of a ruler of a kingdom who has turned to dark magic. Black magic, if you will. He does some pretty gnarly stuff. For a $3.5 million budget, $2 million more than the first, they definitely went all out with the effects. The atmosphere is still foreboding in scenes, but not as good as the first. The Blu-ray double feature from Vestron Video still makes for quite the viewing experience. Better than this. The gore, the effects. We get an imploded head, a visible ribcage, and blood galore, and some more. Its R rating contains comic horror violence. It's not as gory as the first, but it definitely has some good kills in there. As for the effects, we get tons of cool creatures. Aliens, a Frankenstein's monster, an egg, which I think is a reference to contamination. Aforementioned severed hand was cool, and had some cool attacks that were straight out of Evil Dead 2. A woman turns into a panther. There aren't as many monsters as in the first, which can be very disappointing, but the effects are still the highlight. The musical score, corny rap, and upbeat themes would usually make my ears bleed, but surprisingly, I feel this works really well for what kind of film this was. Made in 1992, Waxwork 2 is very much a product of many decades, but it still retains that 90s feel to no end. This was not as great as the first, but it is still a very good attempt. It isn't highly memorable, certain scenes can stick out more than others. I still believe the first Waxwork is better at embedding great scenes of carnage and monsters into your head. They definitely focused more on the humor, which is not necessarily a bad thing. In fact, it gave the movie an extra factor that most sequels would be afraid to even journey to. It took a risk and it turned out alright. The self-aware nature wasn't really done a whole lot around that time. Friday the 13th Part 6 Jason Lives and Return of the Living Dead are two good examples of how to win at doing a self-aware horror comedy. It's beyond decent and passable. It didn't try to copy the first, but instead it tried to continue a good story. I am glad we got a sequel that has a somewhat definitive ending. Still, there is a part of me that would have loved to see Waxwork 3, and with Phantasm, Tremors, Jurassic Park, Star Wars, and many more movies getting revived for more movies lately, I can see this series being rejuvenated for another go. Overall, I give Waxwork 2, Lost in Time, a 3.5 out of 5. There is no US currency box office results, but I am betting it made at least $1 million. It probably didn't cover its budget, which is a big factor as to why it did not have a sequel. Hopefully with the new Vestron Video double feature Blu-ray, people will see the new and creative opportunities with the series known as Waxwork. I am Brian Gatto, host of Horror Show Entertainment. Make sure to like my Facebook page in the description below and to leave comments and subscribe.